Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Joe and I'm the dad.
And I'm Raya and I'm the daughter.
So the cop says to this guy, I'm arresting you for downloading the entire Wikipedia.
The entire Wikipedia.
Yeah, he says, well, wait, I can explain everything. We're going to be taking a look at one of the common phrases we're hearing today. You hear it on the media. You hear people using it all the time. It's the phrase, we're protecting the children. That is going to explain everything. Just like Wikipedia did.
Just like Wikipedia, that's right. And we hear this all over the place. It's always used this way all through history. It's been like this, hasn't it? That you always take the people that are perceived as weaker, and then you say, we're protecting them, and then you use it to justify hurting the actual people that are being marginalized. And so, I mean, this goes all the way back to the 1800s, where we've got to protect the women, and what they really meant was protect white women from people of color.
That's right.
This is the new version of this right now, is we need to protect the children. We need to keep them from having this gender ideology and the gender wars coming and affecting them because it's hurting our kids. And generally, the people that you hear talking most about this is not anybody that's ever stopped and listened to trans people or read any of the actual literature about it or what's going on. Generally, what they've done is they picked out a few voices that are critical of transgender people.
Right. And most of the people who say this aren't really trying to be mean. I mean, they're not villains or anything like that. They're really sincere. Think that they're doing something loving.
I think you're right. And that's how these always work, is they get in by getting us to think a common sense kind of thing. I understand before I transitioned, we talked about this a lot, that to me, it felt like, boy, those trans people are really weird.
Right. And so in this podcast, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking not about attacking their motives. It's about slowing down and asking a better question. What does protecting children actually mean? And I guess just as important, which children are we talking about? If we stop and begin a conversation, having people really start to take a look at this, what are we really protecting?
Right. And now the hard thing about this is for us to slow this down and start talking about it, it can make it sound like we don't care about kids. But here's the thing, is that powerful phrases can shut down thinking. It's too easy to get caught up and say, oh, well, you're right. And then you get phrased as somebody that cares about trans people. You get positioned as if you're the bad guy. What? You're just out there to hurt our kids. Again, we want to have good faith conversations. That means we need to have good faith conversations on both sides. And I don't think that any of us should come out and assume right away that we know the answers, that we understand the answers. This is a complicated subject. Everything relating to gender is difficult, isn't it? And so anytime somebody comes in and says, I've got a common sense answer and I think this is going to work. No, this is more complicated than that.
Well, and what they're doing when they say, we just want to protect the children, we're trying to protect our kids, they use that same thing when they were saying that the schools shouldn't be integrated. We were just trying to protect our kids on both sides. That it's going to create more problems than it's going to solve. We just want to protect our kids. It's the same thing when they said something about gay and lesbian people. And with gay and lesbian people, it was always, well, we don't want a gay person being a scoutmaster, or we don't want any of the lesbian people teaching our Sunday school kids.
Right.
That, we're just protecting our children.
And then you find out later on when the culture changes and we understand how these things work, oh no, We were afraid of the wrong thing. We found ourselves on the wrong side of history. And that's why we want to address this here right now, because it's so easy to hear that phrase about we want to protect the children and assume, yeah, it's just how it is. But we can very easily find ourselves manipulated with the way that the language comes out. And all of a sudden we find ourselves standing against the wrong people.
And that is just so sad. But it happens time and time again. And it happens in other areas as well. We're talking about protecting the children, but in other areas, we can end up being on the wrong side because we think it's the correct side at the time. I see that now in other areas. There are people who are saying, well, we want to make certain that we're doing the right thing. And you're coming up with an idea that's meaningless for us. We don't think there's any such thing as climate problems, climate change. That's not happening. And you're making us do all this stuff for nothing at all. The day will be coming when they'll say, oh yeah, I was right. It's that way with so many things. And it does happen like that.
Right. And so we need to stop and think for a moment. So what do children actually need? Because we should all want to protect children, obviously. We want to protect children from child predators.
Yes.
We want to protect children from groomers. That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Well, we do all want to protect children from groomers.
Right.
We do all want to protect children from people that will assault them or that will hurt them. Of course we do. That is the whole point here. And so you can't just stack the deck and say, my side is the one that's protecting children, your side is the one that's hurting them, and therefore I'm right. To do so is really to ignore important parts of the conversation and to take those transgender children that are actually struggling, having a very, very difficult time with their situation and say, we don't care about you. We know better than you what you need. We know better than your parents what you need, and we know better than your doctor what you need. We're going to tell you, you must wait it out because we in our legislative halls have decided that we know better than you.
So let's take a look at what children actually do need.
It's all pretty common across the board in all times and all places. Things like safety, things like trusted adults to be there for them, watching them, honesty, family acceptance, those kinds of things, to be loved, to be cared for.
And they need at least one adult who listens and believes them. And most importantly, they need acceptance, not pressure, not fear or silence. Acceptance is a big deal, especially for LGBTQ plus kids. Family acceptance alone dramatically lowers rates of depression, anxiety, and what we talk about here a lot, suicide. Family acceptance is a major, probably the most important factor in preventing people from considering things like suicide. Family acceptance is really the foundation for all of the LGBTQ plus kids. And this isn't ideology, it's data. And here is the uncomfortable part. Policies and rhetoric framed as protecting children usually ends up doing the opposite, especially for transgender and gender diverse kids. When kids are told that who they are is dangerous or controversial or unmentionable, unspeakable, that doesn't protect them. It isolates them.
Right. You may have heard recently about a very, very popular detransitioner, Chloe Cole. She's been on a lot of news programs and a lot of places. She has become a very prominent voice among anti-transgender people. Now, her story is that around the age of 11, she says that she started experiencing gender dysphoria. And she was first exposed to LGBTQ plus content through online platforms. So then between the ages of 13 and 17, she received gender affirming care through Kaiser Permanente, including hormone therapy and a double mastectomy. Now, according to what she said, her parents initially wanted to explore her identity without any medical intervention and wait until she became an adult. But the doctor said, no, no, no. You have to do this now. This has to be done. You cannot put this off because otherwise he will be miserable later on. And she has since come out and filed a malpractice suit against them. And she has now been speaking very prominently saying, I was mistreated. And we've got a scenario here. First of all, I want to say that's terrible. That should not have happened.
Of course.
I don't know what was happening with those doctors there or why they weren't stopping to listen, why they were pushing through so hard. It sounds to me like the narrative is being twisted a little bit. But if the narrative is true, that is absolutely terrible.
Sure.
Nobody should ever do that. But where I would disagree is that is not typical for most trans kids. You can't take one bad experience because you could do this for anything. You could talk about how great, ice cream is when you go to the zoo in the summer, but all it takes is one negative experience that you find, one person got terrible food poisoning and died from it one time in 1927 or whatever. You could always find one counterexample.
Right. Even though we all love ice cream, somebody's going to get their licks in there some way.
Oh, I scream now.
Well, that's because you know the scoop.
Oh, no. So the critique with Chloe, and my heart goes out to her. First of all, good for her for figuring out who she really is right now. But she is not representative. And by claiming that this is how it always is really perpetuating harmful misinformation. Because a lot of the claims that she rushed into these irreversible procedures contradict established medical protocols. All of the major medical organizations, including the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Psychological Association, all support gender-affirming care guidelines, and they are not quick on these. They are all requiring multiple steps before treatment approval. So you have to prove, yes, this is really an actual issue. It's not just a flippant thing. It's not just coming on right now. And we're all really sure that this is, you've gone through, you've done your true due diligence. I don't know what happened here.
Well, there are doctors who make mistakes, and there are doctors who sometimes will do the wrong thing. There are counselors that have done the wrong thing. There is not any kind of business out there where there hasn't been mistakes made. But it's very, very, very rare. It would be unusual. It's like the story we always hear about. The doctor cut off the wrong leg.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Sure.
And now they always write on the leg, this one.
Yeah.
On the other one, they write,
good.
no, not this one.
Right, good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so one of the big things that, as Cole has come out, as she's talking now about things, she will point out how transgender people who are now like in their early 20s. Now she's 21. Now, as she's, figured out this is not who I was and this is who I am instead. And I think she's figured out now that she has a platform and she's, unfortunately being used as a voice for this. She will point out how other transgender folks her age will say something like, well, I would die before I would detransition. And she frames this as they're threatening to commit suicide because they can't handle just the basic reality of who they really are. But those of us in the trans community would say that's not at all what we mean when we say something like that. What we mean is this is so critical to who I am that don't you dare take away my happiness, my feeling of being in the world, that I finally fit in, that I don't feel like I'm out of place all the time, and I'm not going back. I've talked about that on this podcast, that for me, it felt like Wizard of Oz. Before my transition, it was black and white, and it was dreary, and it was always hard. But after transition, I walked out the door, and it was in color.
We're going to talk more about the kids that get left out right after this.
I'm Monica Scarbin. I love listening to the Transcendent podcasts, probably because I've been a guest speaker. I've been listening to these podcasts for over 2 years now and have found them to be not only inspirational, but very informative and emotionally lifting to my spirits, especially when I'm not feeling very hot. I'm a supporter, and I'm glad to be a supporter. Please go to transcendent.com, click on support. By as little as $3 a month, you can cancel at any time.
We rarely hear asked, what about the children who are transgender now? What about the kids that are sitting in the classrooms wondering if they're allowed to exist? What message do they hear when adults argue about whether people like them should be visible or acknowledged or supported? Because they are listening. And silence speaks. We do know that. And so does rejection. That's the worst part. If protecting kids doesn't include these children, then the phrase, we're protecting the children, isn't what it claims to be, is it? Is that right, Raya?
Of course, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now I'm thinking through, can you imagine when that show I Am Jazz came out? That was it back in 2015. Can you imagine if that came out now? Now, at the time, the thing about it is that, I only watched an episode or two there. I didn't watch very much of it.
Me too.
But so she ended up being, actually, she's the same age as my oldest daughter, Megan, that we've had on the show here before. But Jazz, when that show was coming out, you really saw her actual gender issues. You could tell that she was a girl. She has always been a girl. It was clear right across the board. Yep. Now, of course, critics will say, well, they were editing that, except you can tell she's being herself. Now, I think there are some people that are saying it's not right to do that to a child. Well, that's the same across the board for any child actor. I can't begin to speak to that. But when we look at her gender and who she is, she was clearly just being herself. And yet, so often when people are saying we must protect the children, what they're really doing is they're saying we must impose our own views on these children and protect them from who we wish that we protect them so that they can be who we wish that they could be, regardless of whether they can actually do that or not.
And the interesting thing is, in almost every case, they don't even know the person they think they're trying to protect. They don't really know anything about them. In many cases, they don't know their name. They don't know one thing about them.
It reminds me a lot. I have learned enough about disabled communities to know that what I think is probably the case is almost always wrong. I sat in a seminar, this was about 6 months ago, with some deaf people talking about how can you contribute and be part of the deaf community as a hearing person. And it was just about an hour talk, and they just scratched the surface. And I learned so much about things. I don't know, is that okay to call somebody deaf? Is it okay to say I'm a hearing person? Yes, that is how we talk about things.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, is it okay? Well, how do I talk about things? Is it okay to expect you to read lips? No, it's not. You should go out of your way to try. And on. They went with a lot of different things. Okay, it is not my place to come and bring my views on how deaf people ought to behave and tell them, I think I know better than you do. But yet, so often when it comes to trans issues, people that have never met a single trans person can get up on their soapbox and say, Things ought to be like this. Children shouldn't behave like this. It should be like this. And they've never even talked to the kid. This kid who was off there in the corner feeling terrible, feeling like they don't fit in, feeling like they just wish that they could be who they really are because there's some jerk over there on his soapbox,
Yeah.
assuming he knows better.
Or maybe they're feeling shame because of what they want to be. And that shame is something that could drive them to some very, very serious actions that you shouldn't want them to take.
I think the worst of all are the kids that are secretly transgender but have not had the guts to come out and tell anybody yet.
Yeah.
They're feeling miserable inside, and I can tell you that feeling is miserable on the inside as you're trying to sort through it. And they hear adults talking about, transgender people and they're transing our kids and they come and villainize the trans community in order to score political points. And you don't know when you say those things that you're hurting somebody close to you.
Right.
They hear you talk. They hear your words coming against the trans community, and they know that you are speaking against them. So they realize they must keep things a secret.
So that reminds me, didn't RFK just sign some papers about a month ago changing some of the laws for transgender children?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Of course, you may know Robert F. Kennedy. He's with the Health and Human Services. So that was December 18th. I just pulled this up here. December 18th, 2025.
About a month ago.
Yeah, he signed a declaration. And instead of calling these gender-affirming procedures, he relabeled these as sex-rejecting procedures.
Oh, yeah.
All of the paperwork, the big criticisms were that they completely ignored the standards of care. They ignored the American Psychiatric Association. They ignored all of the medical professionals. And basically they came and stood on their soapbox like we talked about this guy doing in my example earlier. But now they did this for the whole health industry. Here's the big thing. Do you remember when we talked about a month ago about the Texas law about letting trans people into bathrooms?
Oh, yes, of course.
And the real danger of that law is that it's not even targeting the people that are using the bathrooms, it's targeting the institutions. So it makes the people that are running these institutions into the bad guys. This is the same thing here. This is not targeting the children. This is targeting the institutions. And the thing that is so devastating about this new law that he signed into, or it's not really a law. What it is it is a policy for CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I work as somebody selling Medicare. I work with CMS all the time. I'm always looking in their database. It's part of my daily life. What they are saying now with this new policy is that any clinic or any medical institution that offers any gender-affirming care for any minor cannot receive any compensation from Medicare or Medicaid. So not just for that service. So in other words, let's say there's a family that has a 12-year-old child assigned male at birth, but is wrestling with strong gender dysphoria.
Okay.
And after going through all of the work, they discover that, yes, they believe that gender-affirming care is the best course of best avenue for them. And so they work with some social things first, and that seems to go really well. And they go through all of the things. They go through all of the standards of care and everything. They take their time and they say, we're going to pay you out of pocket for this. We're not even going to go through the insurance. We've got money. We're going to pay you out of pocket. We want to do gender affirming care. We want to just get hormone blockers so that our child can at least wait until she's a little bit older and then let her make up her mind. She's not even going to be doing anything right now. We're not going to do any surgeries or anything. We just want to hold things off until she can make up her mind, which they do all the time for children that are, say, 8 years old and are experiencing puberty symptoms. That is unhealthy. So that's already been prescribed for them. All we're saying is we just want to give those same hormone blockers to these children here. So now this hypothetical family, they go in. Guess who gets punished? The institution that prescribed the hormone blockers. Because now the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services is now saying, okay, we don't care that was nothing in relation to any of what we do. If you have prescribed that for any of your patients, we will now not pay you for any of our patients. So it's a tremendous overreach. Does that make sense, what I'm saying there?
It does. But unfortunately, the people who are backing those ideas are sincere in their belief that that's the right answer. And that is one of the things that's the difference. They aren't necessarily just trying to aggravate people or trying to say, we're just pushing our values on you. They really think this is the right thing to do.
And that's really the question then. So how do we approach people in good faith? There are certainly bad actors out there, but I think we don't want to approach assuming, just like you said, assuming that they have ill intent in their heart.
Right.
I think most people really don't, just like you're saying. And especially if you watch certain kinds of media that is singling out transgender people in order to score political points.
Yeah.
It can be easy to hear that and think, well, yeah, that makes sense to me. Lots of things that you and I probably believe that, well, that makes sense to me. And we're completely wrong on that.
That's right.
This one is just hurting people. So how do we then respond to somebody who's bought into this? Well, when you hear somebody saying, I just want to protect kids, the first thing I would say, let's not make this into an argument. Let's instead ask questions. Let's take that fear and see if we can stop that fear right in its tracks. So things like, oh, yeah, well, so do I. I want to protect kids too. Which kids are you most worried about?
Yeah.
Or, what harm are you concerned might happen? Because here again, most people don't know anybody at all. They don't know any stories. They don't know any actual children that have struggled with gender issues. So they've got an idea in their mind. And they say, well, yeah, we want to protect them from themselves because they don't know.
That's right.
By stopping and slowing them down and saying, so what do you actually know? Who are these kids that you're concerned about? And what about the child that is legitimately going through major, major psychological distress because of their gender?
Oh, yeah.
Are you just saying you get nothing? What do you think? What do we do for that person? You really think that the best thing that we can do is just say, well, suck it up, kid?
Yep. Well,
no.
I'm sure that's what happened back in the 18th and 19th centuries, and even the 20th century.
Well, I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure in many times it did. And I think a lot of people are saying, we want to go back to those times. What was so bad about that? Well, what was so bad about it is that those kids had to suffer in silence. We had a lot of things that were bad in that time. You think about the amount of infant mortality that was going on in those days. We don't want to go back to those days. There were lots of bad things. We could go after thing after thing after thing. Those were not the good old days by any means.
So let's take a look at what do we think protecting children really means, or what it should mean. I think it means listening to them, trusting families and medical professionals, supporting evidence-based care, making room for difference, and we ought to have compassion over panic. It means protecting children from shame, from isolation, and from being told that they are a problem to be solved. They're not a problem to be solved. They're solving their own problems the way they know is right for them.
Right.
It's difficult for anyone to say, oh, I understand that. It's like people who say, I know how you feel. Usually we don't. And that's clearly a difference.
For those of you that are saying, this seems like a hard issue, that's because it is. We're not saying that there's any easy answer for this. There isn't. I can tell you, as both a transgender person and as the parent of a transgender child, the first time that Kelly came to me and said, I would like to see if I can get a chest binder so that it minimizes my chest and I don't feel so dysphoric about it. it made me stop and think.
Sure.
It went from being theoretical to, oh, this is real. And it scared me. So we had a lot of conversations at that point. And they were not all easy conversations. But the point is, through all of that, I wanted to make sure that for me, I never came at it and said, I know better than you do. I did want to make sure that we slowed things down and let him decide at his own pace what was right for him. But I didn't ever want to say, this is how it's going to be either way. I wanted to say, let's slow down. Let's make sure that we're taking the right steps. And that's all we're saying, is that let's let parents and children and their doctors make the decisions. That's what we really want.
Yeah, that's right. And we can't expect all of our elected officials to know everything. So logically, when they don't know everything, they make believe they do.
Right? Or maybe they try to download all of Wikipedia.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I want to say, if this episode has stirred something in you, maybe you're not comfortable with it, or maybe it needs more clarity, or maybe you've got some new questions. That's okay. Growth almost always begins right there. If you know someone who says, I just want to protect the kids, this might be an episode worth sharing. Not to prove a point, but to open up the conversation, because protecting kids doesn't start with fear. It starts with listening.
That's right. And one other thing that starts with listening is turning on this podcast. That one worked out all right this time.
Yeah, finally.
We're grateful to have you coming back here week after week as we approach different issues, some easy, some positive and joyful and cheery, and some like this, difficult conversations, because all of this matters, because the LGBTQ plus people in our lives matter.
Yes, please do share this with other people. And feel free to write us at transdescendant@gmail.com. We read everyone, and we would be looking forward to hearing from you. By the way, we're going to have some exciting news coming up about this podcast in just a couple of weeks. So stick around. And with that, we'll see you Monday.